This is quite possibly my favorite story in the Bible, especially in the Old Testament. Hey, everybody, what's up? Welcome back. My name is Brett Parks, or the Dangerous Crusader, or BP, whatever you want to call me. I usually answer to. We are at a new Bible study this week, and thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. Today, we are looking at Elijah as a prophet of God and the story between him and King Ahab and the priests of Baal. This is by far one of my favorite stories. It makes me fired up. I'm like, oh, yeah, and no pun intended, but it does. It fires me up. And this is a story about fire. So here we go. First of all, we need to know who Elijah was. Now, Elijah was a prophet. Elijah's name meant my God is Lord. And interestingly enough, he did suffer with some kind of depression. And as we read through the scriptures, we see that he's being used by God, but mentally he gets depressed. He gets upset. He thinks that things aren't what they should be. In order to know Elijah as a prophet, we need to know actually what a prophet is. And I got the definition here. A prophet is a person who receives messages from God, mainly concerning events that will take place in the future and convey them to a certain group of people or a single person whom God intends to hear the delivered message. Basically, a prophet is like a megaphone for God. God could speak on his own, he could, but he doesn't do that. He goes through these prophets to go and carry his messages. And Elijah's ministry pretty much marked the beginning of the end for Baal worship. And when it comes to Baal, the false god, we are going to learn a little bit more about him further down on the list, down on the Bible study. But right now, just know that Baal was a false god and many people worshiped him. So when do we first hear about Elijah? We first hear about Elijah when he was chosen by God to confront King Ahab. In 1 Kings 17:1, it says, "Now Elijah, the Tishbite from Tish in Gilead, said to Ahab, 'As the Lord, the God of Israel lives, whom I serve, there will be neither dew nor rain in the next few years except at my word.'" Now, Elijah, what he's doing is he's going to see King Ahab, and he tells King Ahab that God said that at Elijah's word, there will be no more rain and no more crops until he speaks it and gives permission again. That is Elijah. And Elijah right now, those of us that are familiar with Elijah, we always think of this old man with a long beard and all this stuff, but he could quite possibly been anywhere from 30 to 50 years old at the time, which is interesting because a lot of people don't consider their ministry or them as personal beings be effective in this world if you reach 50 years old. But, it could quite possibly be that Elijah was 50 years old when this all went down. So, you never know when God is going to use you. That's just a little side thing. Let's go over the story timeline here. There's Elijah and there's King Ahab. Okay, so Elijah challenged King Ahab, at the Lord's command, by cutting off the rain and the dew in the foreseeable future, therefore causing a drought throughout the land. And that's in 1 Kings 17:1, as we just read. So that's what's going on right now. Elijah said, you know what? You're done. You're done. So it just takes all that. He's saying there's going to be no more rain. There's going to be no more dew. And because of that, all the crops are going to die and there's going to be a great famine. And the reason why we know that Elijah was around the 9th century is that King Ahab ruled from 874 to 853 BC. And King Ahab actually married a woman named Jezebel. And she conditioned King Ahab to adopt parts and ultimately all the pagan gods, particularly Baal. And she wanted this pagan god Baal to be the new god for the people of Israel. King Ahab, man, he's like, he's whooped. She must have been a beautiful girl or a great manipulator because he's supposed to be a king for the Lord Almighty. And here he goes. He gets a girlfriend. He gets married. And now she's making all the decisions. And that actually happens to a lot of us when we get married. But anyway, so Baal, as I said before, is the name of the supreme god worshipped in ancient Canaan and Phoenicia. This false god, he was worshipped in Canaan with the Canaanites, which they were always against God. That was like God's rival. That was the Israelites' rival. The Baal worship, it infiltrated Jewish religious life during the time of Judges. That's when it first started. So Judges 3:7 says, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord. They forgot the Lord, their God, and served the Baals and the Asherahs. I think Asherahs is the right word. So in Judges is when Baal really reared his ugly head. He came into the Israelites and he started getting worshipped by them, which was it was an abomination against God. But then it became widespread during the time of King Ahab. Like it was just like a little niche kind of thing over on the side, worshiping Baal. But then during King Ahab's reign, it really became mainstream. It was a household name, and people just they worship this Baal, and that's in 1 Kings 16:31 through 33. It came about as though it had been a trivial thing for him to walk in the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat. I probably pronounced that wrong. He married Jezebel, the daughter of Ethbaal, king of the Sidonians, and went to serve Baal and worshiped him. So he erected an altar for Baal in the house of Baal, which he built in Samaria. Ahab also made the Asherah. Thus, Ahab did more to provoke the Lord God of Israel than all the kings of Israel who were before him. Oof. Yeah, man. King Ahab, he invited these false gods in, these demons. He invited them in, and he did more harm than any of the kings before him combined. Now that's, the God's talking about that. It's pretty, I'm glad I'm not King Ahab. I'll just say that. But it's important to note that Baal worship didn't just affect Israel. It also affected the people of Judah as well. So the people of Israel, it was mainstream to them, and there were some in Judah, which was a different part of the land. Judah was, they were affected when it came to the Baal worship as well. So God warns Elijah. So remember, Elijah, he comes over, he talks to King Ahab. He says, guess what? There's not going to be any rain. There's not going to be any food until I open my mouth, until the Lord, the true God, accepts me. So he went and he dropped the gauntlet down in front of King Ahab and said, this is what's going to happen. And it starts happening, right? So King Ahab knows that this isn't just talk. So God actually warns Elijah during this time. In 1 Kings 17:1-7, we're going to read all of that. And part of that is what we've already read, but I want to keep reading it to get a little bit more context behind it. So 1 Kings 17:1-7 says, and I'll try not to stumble through this. Now Elijah the Tishbite, who was of the settlers of Gilead, said to Ahab, as the Lord, the God of Israel lives, before whom I stand, surely there shall be neither dew nor rain these years except by my word. The word of the Lord came to him saying, go away from here. When the Lord came to Elijah. So the word of the Lord came to Elijah saying, go away from here and turn eastward and hide yourself by the brook of Cherith, which is east of the Jordan. And then it goes on to say, it shall be that you will drink of the brook, and I have commanded the ravens to provide for you there. So he went and did according to the word of the Lord, for he went and lived by the brook of Cherith, which is in the east of Jordan. The ravens brought him bread and meat in the morning, and bread and meat in the evening, and he would drink from the brook. It happened after a while that the brook dried up because there was no rain in the land. So God tells Elijah, go east of Jordan, go over there to that river, that brook, and I will provide for you. I will send ravens to come and provide for you. That's pretty crazy stuff. So Elijah does it. And even if Elijah, this is important to bookmark for later. Elijah, he might have been skeptical at that time, and he went to that brook because he's honoring the Lord, and it actually happened that the brook was there, and the ravens are coming and dropping meat and food for him in the morning and the evening. And it's everything that the Lord is saying is being done. And Elijah is, he's the person experiencing this. It's not like he's watching from afar. This is happening for him. The drought and the famine deepened. So at this point, at the end, it says he would drink from the brook. It happened after a while that the brook dried up because of the drought. So even though he was there and he was hiding and he was being fed by the ravens and the water was coming through, the brook still dried up because this is a colossal famine. There's no water. So then the Lord tells Elijah, you know what? There's this widow in town. Go see this widow. So the drought and famine deepened, and Elijah meets a widow from another land who is blessed by God with an abundance of food to feed herself and Elijah. So he went to the widow's home, and not only did she take him in and feed him, the Lord blessed her so much that she always had enough food for both of them combined. Another amazing thing that Elijah experiences. Okay, so the next part of the timeline is Elijah sends a challenge to King Ahab. So after like 3 years of no water, no dew, and no food, he sends a challenge. Elijah sends a challenge to King Ahab. So the third year of the drought, Elijah meets with Obadiah. So Obadiah was like the second in command under King Ahab and Jezebel. So he's second in command, and he loves the Lord. He fears the Lord. He's kind of like Elijah. He loves and fears the Lord. And Jezebel and King Ahab don't know that. They just think he's the second, he's the second man. actually what Obadiah did, and this is very heroic, this is amazing, and this gets overlooked a lot, but Obadiah, he found most of the Lord's prophets, like 150, 200, around that, and he went and he hid them in caves because Jezebel was going around killing all these prophets of God because she wanted everybody to worship Baal. So Elijah meets up with Obadiah. Obadiah's walking down the road one day and Elijah pops out from the bush like, hey, what are you doing? That's not what happened. So Elijah sees Obadiah, and in 1 Kings 18:9, Elijah said, go tell your master Elijah is here. Now that was pretty controversial because they've been looking for Elijah everywhere. Ever since Elijah showed up with King Ahab and said, hey, it's not going to rain or anything, I'm going to make sure unless my mouth opens and says it's okay, there's no rain, you're not going to have any food. So after that, when the heavens shut up and there was no rain and the food started getting scarce, King Ahab was like, you know what, we got to find this Elijah guy, and we have to either find a way to make him talk or plead with him. And Jezebel wants Elijah dead. So, and King Ahab's whooped, so he's gonna kill Elijah. But Elijah's been hiding, but he sees Obadiah and he's like, hey, tell King Ahab Elijah's here. And King Ahab, he doesn't know this. They've looked everywhere, but Obadiah's scared to death. He's like, listen, man, you got to be serious, because if I go to King Ahab and say Elijah's here and he comes over here and you're not here, he's going to kill me. That's basically what he's telling Elijah. And Elijah's like, hey, man, just go do what I tell you. I'm not going anywhere. So Elijah meets with King Ahab and tells him to gather all the people of Israel and all the Baal prophets and meet him on Mount Carmel. So it's kind of like one of those things. And I guess it was more in junior high or elementary school. It's like, hey, we're going to fight. It's during school hours. We're going to fight. So meet me after school by the bike racks. It's kind of like that. That's what Elijah's saying. It's like, you know what? It's time to throw down. We're going to see who's number one here. Meet me on Mount Carmel and bring all the people of Israel. I want them all to see this challenge. This is like a pay-per-view event. Bring all them. And you know what? Bring all the prophets of Baal, all of them. And if you find any more prophets, you can bring them too. At 1 Kings 18 through 21 says, I have not troubled Israel, Elijah replied, but you and your father's house have, for you have forsaken the commandments of the Lord and have followed the Baals. Now summon all Israel to meet me on Mount Carmel, along with the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah, who eat at Jezebel's table. So Ahab summoned all the Israelites and assembled all the prophets of Mount Carmel. Then Elijah approached all the people and said, how long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him. So Elijah tells King Ahab, hey, it's going down. Bring all the people, bring all your prophets, bring your crew. And it's just going to be me. And we're going to throw down by the bike racks after school. That's basically what he's saying. And when he sees the people of Israel, he confronts them. He gets up in front of them and he speaks. He's like, listen, you guys have gone against the true God, Yahweh. And you started worshiping these Baals, these demons, and they're horrible demons. These false gods aren't like, hey, self-help, all this stuff, which is very deceiving, but these guys are straight out evil. And Elijah says, how long will you waver between two opinions? Some weeks you're with Baal, some weeks you're talking to God. God does not want that. There is only one God, and that is Yahweh. That is our creator. So he said, if the Lord is God, if my God is God, worship him. But if Baal is God, worship him. And I know, even though none of the Israelites said anything, they were quiet, they're going to see. They're going to find out because Elijah's brought receipts. So it's important to know that there's 450 prophets of Baal and 400 prophets of Asherah. That's 950 prophets there. And what's really interesting, as there's just Elijah. There's only one of God's prophets, and that's Elijah. So it's 950 prophets, but to be fair, it was just the Baal prophets that he was going against, even though both groups chimed in. So let's just be really conservative. There's 450 prophets, verse 1. Now, I'm not a big odds guy. I've gambled in my life, and I'm not good at it, which is great because then I won't spend any more money on that. But I know that if it's 450 to 1, I'm pretty sure the 450 are supposed to win. So if I'm betting, I'm going to bet for the 450 prophets. But this is different because the actual creator of the universe, the one that spoke existence into life, boom, he's that one. So Elijah tells everybody, okay, get 2 bulls, separate them. I want you to cut them into pieces. And he tells the Baal prophets, he's like, listen, you pick which bull you want. And there's an altar over there with a pile of wood. And I want you to put the pieces of bull on that firewood, but do not light the fire. Just leave it there. Now, this is very important. So the Baal prophets, the 450 of them, probably after sitting there and analyzing each bull, seeing which one's the best bull for Baal, they decide on a bull. They pick them up, all the pieces, and they put it on the fire, wood. And they said, you know what? Okay, we're not gonna light the fire. Now, what do you want us to do, Elijah, since you're so almighty with your almighty God? So 1 King 18:23-24 says, get 2 bulls for us. Let the prophets of Baal choose 1 bull for themselves, cut it into pieces and place it on the wood, but not light the fire. And I'll prepare the other bull and place it on the wood, but not light the fire. Then you may call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord, the God who answers by fire. He is God. So this is amazing, because after the Baal prophets got their bull pieces and put it on the fire, Elijah said, you got it? You sure? You sure you want that one? Okay. So he goes and he gets that. I'm paraphrasing. I don't know if he actually said that, but I'm trying to make it entertaining. So then Elijah gets that other bull and he puts it over on the firewood on his side. And he said, okay, this is what's going to happen, guys. Hey, you hear me, 450 prophets? We are going to call on our gods. I'm going to call on the Lord, and you're going to call on Baal. And whichever one lights this fire on these altars, if Baal lights a fire in the altar, he is the one true God. But if my Lord, if he lights the fire, then my God is God. So let's see. So this is the interesting part. This is where it gets really fun.